Hello, everybody, and happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
And welcome to the back catalog listening party. My name is Mother Banjo, one of your hosts.
My name is Anthony Ihrig, the other host.
And today we have joining us all the way from Austin, Texas, Matt the Electrician.
Hello.
And Connie joining us from Richfield. Chris from enjoying ice cold German pills on tap today. Nice.
Ooh, excellent.
And what's on tap for you today, Anthony?
I'm also going to Germany here for my favorite summer brew, the Paulaner Hefeweizen. I love this on a nice, beautiful, hot, sunny summer day here in Minneapolis.
That's right.
How about you?
Well, I'm not in Minneapolis today, as I normally am. I'm in my remote studio in Cedar Falls, Iowa, and on the way down, so I just because Iowa, you can pick up wine in the gas station, which is not something you can do in Minneapolis. So I got a little Pinot Grigio for this because it's warm here too, something nice and summery. And Matt, are you enjoying any kind of beverage in Texas where it's hot?
I've got some perfectly adequate Austin, Texas city water.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Well, it's important to stay hydrated when it's I don't know, how hot is it down there right now?
It's not too bad. I mean, it's 100 and something, but it's not Phoenix or whatever. It's like 102, 101, somewhere in there.
Excellent.
Well, if you're new to the show, this is what we do every week. It's our musical happy hour. That's why we're toasting our glasses. Joe in South Minneapolis has his Summit Saga, delicious brew. Go ahead.
And a special shout out to Joe, who I ran into last night at Lake Harriet Bandshell when Jasper Lepak, actually one of our past guests, was performing a free
cool.
concert there. And Joe came over and said hi. And it was so funny because even though I've seen him before, and of course we chat every week. He's a regular listener. I don't get to see him in person very often.
That's
so
super cool. And I see he's got a KFAI beer glass.
I know. So shout
supporting
out
public
to Joe.
radio.
Yes.
Excellent.
And Alan from Texas. Oh, martini time for Alan. All right. And 102.
Yeah,
So
that's about right.
just down the road from you.
Yeah, it's somewhere in that neck of the woods right here.
Excellent. Well, we are so excited you all are joining us today. No matter what the temperature or what you're drinking, you're here with us to enjoy some music and conversation, which is what the back catalog listening party is all about. And if you're new to the show, we invite different artists on to dig into old records. And because there's a lot of them out there, it turns out. I don't know if you all knew that, but a lot of albums have been made.
Yes.
There's a lot right here in my shop.
Yeah. A lot of musicians, we use them for end tables and, shelving and whatnot. But we're going to dig into Matt the Electrician's 2009 release. But before we do, Matt, for folks who maybe aren't as familiar with you or your music, maybe you can give us the 2-minute origin story of how Matt the Electrician came to be Matt the Electrician, the musician.
Yeah. Well, I grew up on the West Coast, Southern Oregon and Northern California primarily. And in 1996, I moved to Austin, Texas with nary an idea of what that really held for me. Just put everything in my car and came down here. And the first job I got, I'd been working construction up in Oregon. And the first job I got was as an electrician's apprentice. And I did that I was an electrician for almost 10 years. I eventually got my license. And the whole time I was trying to play music too here in Austin. So electrician was the day job and a musician was the night job until I finally quit the day job.
But I love that Matt the Electrician continued to be your name, not like Matt the singer-songwriter or Matt the musician.
No. Well, I just always thought it was funny because a lot of the people I met down here, when I first got here, everybody had a day job, and then you'd play at night and there were painters and framers and waiters and, all sorts of stuff. And my name kind of happened accidentally. I didn't necessarily plan on doing it. I would talk about doing construction, talk about doing electrician work. And it kind of stuck. A friend of mine said, "Oh, you ought to call yourself Matt the Electrician." I said, "That's a terrible idea. That's stupid." And like literally while we were talking about this in a restaurant in Austin, some guy came up to the table and said, "Hey, you're that electrician guy?" And I thought maybe I'd worked on his house. And I said, "Yeah, I am." And he goes, "Oh, we saw you the other night at this open mic and really liked you." And I was like, "Oh, that's that's hilarious. So it's like I can't really say no to the name now. I just have to
It's
do
very memorable.
Yeah, so I have to ask, do you get questions about electrical work now that you're doing your singer-songwriter thing full time? Do people like ask you questions? Like,
I mean, there's kind of the smart alecky, like every interview I've ever done, they will ask
Yeah.
like, hey, can you fix my three-way
Yeah.
switch? And my general response is, I mean, yes, I can. And
I won't, but I can.
yeah.
Right.
And I don't get as many actual requests for work these days, but I still get them like once a month or something. I'll get tagged in a Facebook post is what it is.
Mhm.
And honestly, if I can help my friends out over the phone, I will totally do that. But I'm not going to anybody's house.
Maybe at like a venue, it'll be like, is there a doctor on the plane? Like the lighting
Yeah.
goes out or something like that. And Matt the Electrician runs to the rescue at the gig.
Exactly.
We are so excited to have you here and to talk about your music, not your electrical skills, we promise. Hopefully, we won't need your electrical skills today. That's what we're hoping, right, Tony?
Absolutely.
That we have this dialed in. But the album we're going to talk about today, again, came out in 2009. Where does this album sort of fit into because you have a pretty wide discography these days?
Yeah, this, gosh, I should have like counted. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think this is my 5th or 6th album. And I now have 11 or 12. Yeah.
Kind of
So
in
it's
the middle.
somewhere
Mid-career.
It's right in the middle. Yeah, it was right in the middle, and it was it wasn't the first record that I got some good press on. That was my 3rd record, but this record got me a lot of good press locally and here in Austin, and it got a lot of play. And I think to this day, it's still probably my best sales, record sales amount.
Excellent. Well, cool. Well, we can't wait to dig into this record. And it looks like Kat is joining us from the Northern Nevada high desert.
All right, that's my
Kat.
aunt Kat.
Awesome. And I think she wins for the coolest emojis on
Yeah,
her,
let's
on her
take a look at
comments.
that
So,
again.
yeah,
Yep,
exactly.
absolutely.
That's awesome. All kinds of positive vibes happening. And we're going to get more of those positive vibes. Let's hear some music.
Let's do it.
The first track you picked to feature today is Bridge to Now. Is there anything you want to say about it before we take a listen?
Oh, Bridge to Nowhere.
Oh, I love how I wrote it down as Bridge. I must have just paused.
Yeah, this is one I wrote for my folks in Ketchikan, Alaska, which has become a regular place that I play. And I think a couple years before I made this record, it was, I think 2007 or 2008 was the first time I went up there and played. And I've been up there most every year since, and played shows up there. So this was one I wrote for the folks up there, because I don't know if you know the Bridge to Nowhere story.
No.
No.
I do not.
Well, you've heard of a Bridge to Nowhere, yeah?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like as a political, thing that people would throw at each other.
Mm-hmm.
I think at some point it was used as kind of a general blanket term for pork barrel spending of any time you're attaching something ridiculous. So some member of Congress would go, well, I want, a cheese factory in my, what, I don't know. I don't know why a cheese factory came up. Maybe
I want a cheese
Wisconsin
factory.
recently, right?
Yeah. Maybe you already have cheese factories. But yeah, so the ridiculous, the idea that there would be a bridge to nowhere, that's pretty ridiculous. And so it was this thing that you'd hear about, but I never knew that it actually was. It was this place, Ketchikan, had asked.
It really is a place. Okay.
Some legislator up there had asked for extra money to build a bridge, and they said, "Oh, it's a bridge to nowhere," because it basically was a bridge from the town of Ketchikan to this island that there's not really anything on the island except for an airport, which Ketchikan itself is an island. So that kind of makes access to the airport pretty important because it's kind of the only way you can get off. I mean, there's boats and stuff, but you're pretty far away from stuff. So it felt to me like it was a bad marketing choice to call it a bridge to nowhere when it was really the bridge to the airport. And and so I wrote this song for my friends and all, and it's kind of a political song, I guess, in the sense of um, so much of the discourse in this country then and now and maybe forever tends to focus on the superfluous and shallow ends of things to make kind of gotcha points instead of like actually dig into almost any story, and there's something actually real and important usually going on.
Excellent. Well, let's give it a listen. This is Matt the Electrician, Bridge to Nowhere, here on the Back Catalog Listening Party.
Oh, there's no such thing as a bridge to nowhere. 'Cause there are two sides to everything, and I am wrong most of the time. There's a first time for everything. Oh, I have been to Ketchikan, Alaska. I was treated like a king. And I have been to New York City, and I have felt like nothing. If you can walk on water, then you can walk all over me. Right now, I'm sinking fast into the ocean, and maybe just a bridge is all I need. Oh, I have almost never been fishing. I'm scared of the fishing hooks, and I have never wrestled a bear. But I have seen some pictures in books, and they don't care. In Ketchikan, Alaska, they're just like me, like I am, and they are building a bridge to nowhere. Nowhere's close to Ketchikan. You can walk on water, then you can walk all over me. But right now, I'm sinking fast into the ocean, and maybe just a bridge is all I need.
All right, Matt the Electrician with Bridge to Nowhere from his 2009 album Animal Boy, which we're revisiting today on the Back Catalog Listening Party with Matt the Electrician, joining us from Austin, Texas, but singing about Ketchikan, Alaska. And I have to say, my sister lives in Anchorage, so the big city, but which is nothing like Ketchikan, I will say. But one thing that I know both from spending quite a bit of time in Alaska and also from musicians I know who've played in Alaska is that Alaskans are really excited when folks come to play the area because so many people just kind of bypass it altogether. And then if you make it beyond Anchorage or Fairbanks to these small towns where there aren't roads to them, again, you have to fly little crazy planes to get there or boats. And, people are just so excited to have music and really grateful. And yeah, that's my experience. And I'm sure that Ketchikan was probably pretty excited to have you there.
Yeah, I mean, it was great. It's been great. It's like I say, I've been going back. I've been maybe 12 or 13 times, and it's just been fantastic. and I was kind of brought up, not by mistake. Well, it was kind of by mistake. That the guy that brought me up there, about once a year, he and some buddies would go down to Seattle to see music because nobody really came up there. And he was a big Todd Snider fan, and he had heard Todd Snider tell a story about playing in Alaska, I think maybe in Homer. And so he got home from this concert in Seattle and he thought, I'm going to call Todd Snider and I'm going to book him in Ketchikan. But he just didn't, he'd never done anything like that before. And he looked up Todd Snider's manager's phone number on the internet, and it was there. And at the time it was a guy named Elvis, that I think was exactly as you would imagine Todd Snider's manager named Elvis to be. Yep. And so this guy, Matt, who's like maybe 20 years old at the time, he like cold calls the manager and says, hey, I was hoping to book Todd Snider in Ketchikan. And the manager like starts hitting him with all the, cool, so what's the draw? What's the capacity? Like, I need hospitality. Like, just going into all the business stuff. And he's like, I don't know. I just saw him play. I thought it would be cool. And the guy's like, right. So I need all these details. Like, what are you guaranteeing? And he got scared and he hung up the phone. Oh, no. And at the time, I think he was on MySpace or something. And a friend of his had put a song of mine on the mixtape, and he looked at my MySpace profile and he goes, I need somebody who's not quite as famous as Todd Snider.
So that, you're like, I fit the bill. Yes.
Well, and he got prepared before he called my agent, and he got on the phone with her and was very professional. And he said, I'd like to hire Matt the Electrician to play a corporate party, and we'll fly him out and we'll put him up. And, you know, so he was all prepared. So my agent was like, hey, Matt, does this sound good? I'm like, great. And they flew me up there like first class, but it wasn't a corporate party. He lied. And then, and then he didn't put me up in a hotel. He goes, you're going to stay at my girlfriend's house. But then I found out that like his girlfriend wasn't really his girlfriend. They had gone on a couple of dates.
Oh my goodness. She knew you were coming, at least. I hope.
She did not know I was coming until the day that he picked me up from the airport. So it was this kind of crazy thing, but then he and his buddies took me out and showed me the whole island. And the show was at this community center. And the guy who brought me up, Matt Hamilton, is it's like third or fourth generation Ketchicaner. And in fact, I think it's his grandfather is an Amundsen, who's related to the Amundsen that went to the North Pole. The very famous Norwegian explorer. But so I played in this community center that was kind of owned by his parents or his grandparents or something. And all of his friends and family and his teachers from high school and all these people were there. And it was a party. He threw a big party for all of his friends because he had kind of he was getting his life together. He had some, rougher times when he was younger. And he wanted to say thank you to all of his friends. And it was like this really beautiful thing. He had made a bucket list. He was like, there's not enough music that comes up here. And so we brought this guy, and he got up in front of all these Alaskans, all of his friends and family, who he had just given a bunch of free beer and food to. So they were pretty rowdy. And he goes, all right. And I'm going to leave out the swearing part, but he goes, all right, y'all need to shut up. You need to shut up and listen to him. He's going to sing songs and you shut up. And everybody kind of shut up. And they sat down and they listened, and it was like, it was a beautiful thing. And I played a couple shows that time, and then I came back the next year. I played their wedding, the girlfriend who didn't know I was going to stay at the house. And
they got married in the end.
They got married. I played the wedding, and they had a couple of kids. And
wow!
But it's just it was such a beautiful experience. And like you say, it was like this. It's a small town. It's a small community, very tight knit, and when you get in with that, it's just, it's so much more rewarding. There's a line in the song about, being treated like a king. Mm-hmm. My first time in Ketchikan, they flew me first class. So I was like, oh, this is cool. They didn't fly me first class after that. It's kind of first time's free. But I said, I've been in New York City and felt like nothing. And, when you're touring, that is often when you go to a place where every band on earth also goes, it's hard to kind of break through the hard exterior of city people sometimes, you know? And so I think that combination of being able to go to a small town where not only are they so appreciative, but then also if you're appreciative back, if you're like, this is fun for me also, you end up forging friendships and, you know.
Yeah, it
And
sounds
you-
like you're part of the community now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and you get an experience too that is rare in touring where you're like, oh, it's not just like I have a relationship with maybe a venue that I play at a lot or with some of the fans, but you're like actually the town, and not everyone has even been to a place like Ketchikan, Alaska, let alone getting to like go back and really get to know a community. And I think that's really special when you're playing a lot of venues that are kind of, not that the venues are all the same, but you know, where you're just kind of like, I'm in the car again, I'm driving, I'm playing the show, I'm getting out. But like then to go to a place like Ketchikan, which is so unique and beautiful, I think is really cool. So great stories of the road here.
That is a great story. And speaking of stories, Aunt Kat said that there is a bridge known as the Bridge to Nowhere in your family history in Pittsburgh. So
I did not know that.
So we can, you can follow up.
That's where my mom grew up.
Awesome. All right. We're making all kinds of connections here today.
That's right. Making bridges to places, to real places, hopefully. And if you have comments or questions for Matt or any of us, feel free to throw them in the comments as we go. A lot of the show is about that conversation, about the music and about life and songs, as Matt's hat says, songs, I think is what that says.
Songs.
Yeah. Yes. Which is what it's all about here. And the next track that you picked to feature from this record, Animal Boy, is Got Your Back. This time I wrote down the whole word for my reference. So is there anything you want to say about this song before we dive in?
It's just, I wrote this is one that I wrote for my wife.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. That's all we need to know. Matt the Electrician, Got Your Back, here on the Back Catalog Listening Party.
It's a little step in the right direction. Couldn't see it from space. I'm right next to you. Whatever you decide to do, I've got your back. We're on the same track. In the universe, you're a molecule. In my eyes, you're a great and big deal. Bigger than the moon. You're the only tune I hear. I've got your back, we're on the same track. And if we're moving, then we're moving together. And if we're standing still, then it's still forever. I'm not a psychic, I'm not a mind reader. I don't know when a ship's gonna be here. If it never comes in, I would do it all again. I've got your back, we're on the same track. And if a big wave washed it all away, the apocalypse and the judgment day, I would testify, looking God in the eye, saying I got her back, we're on the same track. And if we're moving, then we're moving together. And if we're standing still, then it's still forever. It's a little step in the right direction. Couldn't see it from space. I'm right next to you. Whatever you decide to do, I've got your back. We're on the same track. And if we're moving, then we're
Matt the Electrician with Got Your Back from his 2009 album Animal Boy, which we're revisiting today with Matt the Electrician. And Tony had a great question, which I want to know the answer to as well. Matt, what do you think about when you listen to your own music?
I was listening to Metallica.
Yeah, you just switched it off and put something else in.
No, it's, it's I think I speak for most artists that I don't usually listen to my own songs. Like you spend so much time listening when you record the record, and then a couple weeks after, between mixing and mastering, you listen to it hundreds of times. So by the time it comes out,
You like hate.
well, whether you even hate it or not, you just never listen to it
Yeah.
again.
Right.
There's not, and I have kind of a funny thing in my house because my kids will like to listen to my songs, and they know I don't like to listen to it with them, so they'll kind of like listen by themselves. And anyway, so that was kind of interesting because I haven't listened to that recording of that song in so long, and mostly I was remembering recording it, which is kind of fun because it's it's been like 12 years, 13 years or something since I was making that record.
Well, that's perfect because I really wanted to know a little bit about the recording of this. I was digging the instrumentation and the difference is between the first and second song, and the horns, and it sounded like maybe like a banjo-lele or something
Yeah, that's
back
what I was
there. And
wondering.
so I'd love to know just a little bit about how this album was actually created. So like maybe where and what the kind of personnel who did you have on this record with you?
Well, like I said, this was my fifth or sixth record, and all the records up to this point had been pretty standard. Like me and my band would go in, lay down the basics, then I come in and sing everything, and then you do some overdubs and you're done. And this record took me about 2 years to make. I made it with my friend Mark Addison, who has the Ihrig studio here near Austin. And I think initially that song Got Your Back was maybe the fourth song that I brought in, but he was pretty busy and I didn't have a lot of money. So it was kind of like he'd call me and go, "Look, I got next Tuesday open." And I would go, "Great." And so I would come in on Tuesday with one song, and we would work on that one song all day. And then we wouldn't touch it for like a week. And then I would come back in on like one day. So I was kind of paying by the day. And it was just he and I mean, I don't know if you have the actual CD. No, you probably don't, because nobody does.
When he
Because
says
it was
nobody
sold
does.
out,
Yeah,
folks,
exactly.
That's why, because it's out of print now, unfortunately.
But Mark Addison, the producer, engineer, he and I played almost all the instruments on the record. There's some overdub stuff where I brought in a few people to sing backup, and there's like a drummer here and but the Got Your Back is an example of one where he and I played everything on that track. And we were doing it very much like I would play the song on my guitar to a click, and then we would come back and we'd build drum loops, or we'd play the drums ourselves. One of us would play the bass. I'm a horn player, so I would play all three horns and layer those, and then we would start adding toys. And so I think on that record, on that song, I heard like a jaw harp in there, and there's a lot of ukuleles. But our approach with all the songs is we would throw everything in the kitchen. Like there were no bad ideas. It was like,
Nice.
"Hey, we should put sitar on this." We go, "Sure," and we'd put it. And then at the end of a day, we would listen back and go, "Okay, no, that's terrible, and that's terrible. But this one thing works really nice for this one note. We'll leave that." And so almost every song was built where we would do an entire song take of almost any instrument we could think of, and then go back and kind of like take stuff out.
Right on, like a sculptor kind of take.
Yeah.
It
It was approached very much that way.
very cool.
Yeah, very neat and cool to hear that you were doing a lot of the parts. So you said that you're a horn player. Is that what you were playing like growing up? Did you start off in the horn world before you went to guitar?
Yeah, I started at the age of 5. I started playing trumpet and played it all the way through. I went to college and studied trumpet in college.
Oh, cool. Very cool.
So because of that, you also play tuba and F horn, and I have a euphonium and stuff like that.
Do you ever bring those on tour with you? Like, do you ever just like, oh, I'm going to bring out my trumpet now? Or my
Sometimes.
sousaphone.
I'll do it when I'm doing like a co-bill tour or an in the round kind of tour. I almost brought it on the last tour I was on because
I
I
was
did
gonna
some.
say when you came to the Cedar
I
recently in
know.
Minneapolis, you were doing it in the round show that I hosted, and you did not bring the trumpet. I think you just had a guitar with you that night, right?
I did. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was supposed to bring the trumpet and I forgot because I had 3 shows with Natalia Zuckerman and I was going to play trumpet on her stuff and then I left it at home. So
Yeah. Well, Alan wants more cowbell. I'm sure you never get requests for that.
I don't travel with a cowbell either though.
Well, so are there any instruments that you've always, I mean, because it sounds like this album was definitely sort of a bit of a musical playground, which is fun when you have the luxury to do that. Not everyone
Yeah.
always has the time, but because you took your time, you were able to. Are there any instruments you have not yet recorded with that you are like, oh yeah, I really want to work in that instrument on a future record that you haven't done yet?
Gosh.
Yeah,
That's a great question. Just because I think especially kind of in the folk Americana world, I feel like largely, at least in the case of myself and a lot of my friends, we're people that we go out and play live solo acoustic. Sometimes you have one side person and you look at the record as a thing that you get to make that's this fanciful other thing. Like it's a piece of art that exists on its own and people can listen to it and you go, that's not how I'm going to sound live. I'm not a rock band. I've made like 8 records that sound exactly like what my band sounded like live at a club. And that was fun. I'm glad we did that. But it's then also fun to kind of make this other thing. And so I think because of that, almost every studio experience you're in, the producers are like, cool, so we can bring in strings, we can bring in horns, so you've kind of tried all the things. One of my favorite instruments is the mbira, which is the
Yeah.
Zimbabwean version of the kalimba. And I played in a
It's like a
Zimbabwean.
thumb piano kind of
It's
thing,
it's
right?
a thumb
Yeah.
piano, and the mbira the wood is more solid. It's hardwood, and then the tines are much more solid and kind of dense. And I'm not sure what of the scale, but I played horns in a Zimbabwean influenced band and got introduced to a lot of the big Zimbabwean mbira players. And for whatever reason, the other day I was listening to Thomas Mapfumo, who's one of the great mbira players of Zimbabwe, who also is credited with taking the mbira songs and transferring them to Western instruments. So it's a lot of this kind of high life sounding, like slightly West African vibe stuff. But he takes everything that was from the mbira and puts it over here. But then sometimes they'll also still play the mbiras, and it would be super fun to have mbira on some tracks.
I love that. That would be
Cool.
great. And then Joe said no theremin yet.
I worked with a version of a theremin, which is to say a saw. I had somebody play the saw.
Yep.
That's quite similar, isn't it?
Yeah. It
That
has
was
a very
on my
similar
third
vibe.
record.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Chris kind of asked a question that is similar to something you kind of were touching on, which is how does like an album like this, where you did craft the songs in the studio with all the stuff, were these songs you were already playing live by the time you went into the studio, or did you have to sort of revisit them once you started to tour the album to make them work live?
Yeah, when I made this record, I had a couple pretty regular gigs in Austin with my band and then also solo. And because all the records up to this point, I had always had my drummer and bass player at least, and sometimes my guitar player in the studio with me. This one was very different. And so I remember saying because we were playing a weekly gig and I would bring these songs in as I was writing them and recording them. And the drummer would go, well, you just recorded this. Like, what do you want me to do? And I was like, oh, this is a separate thing. I want you guys to do whatever you want to do on these songs. And so that was kind of fun because then over time, for those that collect my records, there's Animal Boy, and I don't have the other one with me, but I made a live record in probably 2010 or 11, and it has a bunch of the songs from Animal Boy on it. And the versions aren't like crazy different, but they're very different because I didn't tell the band what to do. and I told them not to listen to the record.
Which is cool.
Cool.
Yeah, then you
Yeah.
have totally
It's
different
like another
versions of the
piece
song.
of art, a different
Yeah,
version of it.
I thought it was nice. As for me at that time, it was a change of pace.
Well, and also I think it frees up the musicians to be themselves, if they're just trying to recreate something, especially if they're recreating something you did in a studio and chopped it up and, it's
Oh yeah,
it would be hard to recreate probably and being different players.
yeah.
Joni said, I adored the show Army Wives and think you may have performed a song for the show. I don't know if that's true. And how did you get involved in TV? Because your music has been featured on television shows and commercials.
Yeah, I did. I had a song on Army Wives. I don't remember which song. It was been a lot of years now, but yeah, that's just where your catalog is kind of, I have a person who just has all my songs in a database somewhere, and they shop them to people, and so somebody shopped that, and then they just cut me a check, and so I didn't like write a song for TV,
Right.
because I think she says Peter Himmelman did soundtrack work. That's pretty cool too.
Yeah.
But that's different. You're like doing fresh
Right, you're
work.
kind of commissioned to do that kind of work usually.
Yeah.
So and it's funny that your stuff has been used in a lot of television and in that medium, because I feel like your songs a lot of times have a very cinematic component. Like a lot of times they have a feeling of like scenes and I like have a visual component. I don't know. When you approach writing, do you think of it that way, or is it just however the song comes out, it comes out?
Yeah, I don't know if I actively think about that when I'm writing. I do know that I was just rewatching Freaks and Geeks, which is the best TV show ever made, and partly because there's only one season of it, and so it's just stopped in time. There's no opportunity for it to get bad. But there's a moment where Bill, one of the geek characters, is telling this girl that she goes, every time I see you, you're always like laughing at something or smiling. And she goes, what do you think about? And he goes, I watch movies in my head. And I think we all kind of do probably, but I have always identified with that. So I'm sure there's some natural way that the songs kind of come out in that way, because I do see the
story kind of in your head. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to get one more question, then go into the music, because we want to hear a couple more songs before we wrap up today. Diane says hello from a cabin on Leech Lake near Walker, Minnesota.
All right.
Living her best life if she's up in a cabin and yet can still also enjoy a live conversation with Matt the Electrician. She said, where was your weekly Austin gig?
I had several, and every Monday my band and I played at the Saxon Pub, opening up for Bob Schneider.
Oh,
And
that's
then-
a good gig.
It was a good gig. We did that for 9 years. It
Wow.
was interesting. It was a good learning, like an experience in how to play gigs, and how to play gigs in front of people that don't necessarily want to see you at first, and how to like win over audiences and all that kind of stuff. And then every Wednesday I played at Cafe Mundi with Southpaw Jones, my buddy. And every Sunday I played with the pop stars, the Dads Who Rock, which was Nathan Hamilton, Michael Fracasso, and Beaver Nelson. And we would play at Jovita's.
Nice.
Awesome.
Nice. Well, I have to ask this quick follow-up before we get into the next song, which is, you mentioned that opening for Bob Schneider every week, you got experience of how to win over a crowd. So what would be your number one, what's like the best thing you learned from that experience or over your years of touring, is how to win over a crowd that isn't there to see you, for any of the musicians out there? What's your top tip? If you're willing to divulge your secrets,
I mean, I think it changes over time. Like at the time, there were things that worked that I probably wouldn't do now later in life. But there was I think doing something of shock value, as long as it's kind of small and quick. So we had a kind of a small collection of songs that were very, very rough and dirty. And I don't know if you've ever seen Bob Schneider, but he has a whole side of his catalog that is like that. And so appealing to his fan base, if you do something right off the bat that's pretty risque, they will kind of pay attention. But the other thing that I always felt as an acoustic artist is that sometimes the best way is to get very small, is to like get very, very quiet and do something that really kind of, you can kind of trick people to kind of draw them in, and then you can expand after that. But some version of like something that's very loud or shocking,
quiet, yeah.
and then you get very, so like you just follow the Pixies roadmap, the loud, quiet, loud, just do that.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And Tony says was introduced to your music when you opened for Bob in Minneapolis at the Fine Line in the mid 2000s. So,
Nice.
Oh yeah.
so it worked. You've won over fans. So,
That was a fun show.
well, let's dig into some more music of this album, Animal Boy. The next track is College. Is there anything you want to say about this? And is this about your own college experience?
This is about my own college experience.
All right, let's give it a listen. This is Matt the Electrician, College, here on the Back Catalog Listening Party.
All right, we rolling? Okay. 1, 2, 3.
I owe $35 to the library at Humboldt State University, but I dropped out 15 years ago, so I never paid it, and I'm still not gonna. I never got my report card, but I didn't go to class and I didn't work hard, so I didn't want to know how bad I did, but I know I never made the dean's list. And college is a waste of time if you want to be a baker or a candlestick maker. You still have to wait in line at the bank drive-thru and the train tracks to behind people like me with no degree. 'Cause I know the conductor and he knows me. You might have a nicer car, but I've traveled pretty far, and all I have is an old guitar. Or $40 for a bag of weed in the summer 1993. $40 is all I have, and it isn't mine, it belongs to my parents. 500 points for a roll of cookie dough. In the cafeteria they got sloppy joes, and the sloppy joes cost 3 points. I won't eat in the spring, but hey, cookie dough. And college is a waste of time if you want to be a diver or a big rig driver. You still have to go to the store and share the road with a wide load. It's taking up all 3 lanes, and you can't get around, and it's a big pain. And the driver hasn't slept in 3 whole days, but he knows one thing, and that's freeways. He's got a Gatorade bottle where he goes pee, and you're behind him with your college degree. I owe $35 to the library at Humboldt State University, but I dropped out 15 years ago, so I never paid it, and I'm still not gonna.
Matt the Electrician with College, and here in the Back Catalog Listening Party. And I have to say, after you released the song, did anyone from the college or the library come to collect that fund? Like, now we got him.
Right, admitting it.
No, what's funny is that I've played there at the college like 5 times since, and been paid by the college, and no, and now my daughter goes to school there.
Oh, funny.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh,
which
that's
is very
great.
fun.
Well, Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say it's, speaking of getting paid, it's as good a time as any to let you know that this music can be purchased in its high resolution form. I know a lot of people are in the streaming services these days, but Ellen and I and Matt are listening to a little higher quality versions before it goes through the pipes of YouTube. And as we've said many times in the past, one purchase of even a digital copy of a CD is worth 10,000 streams or something like that. So if you like what you hear, Matt's got all his stuff, not just this album, but all his stuff on Bandcamp. You go to matttheelectrician.bandcamp.com. And Bandcamp also allows you to pay what you want. So if you wanted to throw a little something in his tip jar, you could purchase the digital album and then put a little something extra there. If you just want to send him a tip, you can do that too. We have the tip jar information scrolling on the screen. He's got a PayPal and a Venmo. You could just throw him a little something and let him know how much you appreciate the music that he's putting out and how much you want to hear the next album.
Yes, definitely. And on that last track, there's been a couple tracks we've heard with some whistling, and I'm guessing that was you.
Yeah.
But I also was reminded, like 2009, there was a lot of whistling happening. I remember on recordings. Yeah.
Really?
But yes, I remember there was like a thing where there was like a whole bunch of like indie rock bands. They all like had a whistling, and it followed. And then like a couple years later was hand claps. I don't know.
Yes.
There's
I
trends.
remember
That was
the
the whistling
Hand
era,
claps.
whistling
Everyone
era.
remembers the hand claps.
Yeah.
But I have to say it's particularly fine whistling. I can't whistle myself, so I'm always a little jealous of people who can. So is this your own whistling, and is this a carryover from your horn days?
Yes, brass players in general are very good whistlers because we have good lip control. I've whistled on all my records since 1998. So
you were ahead of the curve. Maybe you started the
original
trend.
whistler over here.
The trend probably came from, and I will, I'm very kind of humble about all of my, mediocre abilities as a writer and singer and performer of all kinds. I think that there's a lot of people that are better than me at most of it, except for whistling. I'm very, very proud. I will put myself against any whistler in the business except for Andrew Bird.
I was just going to say, I want to see a whistle off with you and Andrew Bird.
I won't go anywhere near that. He is in another category. Absolutely.
He's like the opera singer. I feel like he's like
there's a world of professional whistling championships, and he actually, I think, whether he's done those or he at least could, but he can whistle opera and classical pieces, and I can't. It's just something I've done since I was a kid.
That's cool. I mentioned it's also a useful skill for a solo artist. Like if you're out there performing, it's a whole nother instrument that you get to lay over the top. Do you do a bit of that in your live shows?
Yeah, I try not to sometimes I don't really write set lists, and sometimes I will forget, and I'll end up doing like 3 in a row that have whistle solos, and I'm like, all right, I gotta knock that off.
All right, but that's great though that we can if you go see Matt, you get to hear some of that world-class whistling.
And also it's great because as a touring musician, that's like one instrument you don't have to check, like
it's true.
Like you can't bring your trumpet on every gig or your banjo along with your guitar, but like your whistling you can always bring with you. I'm always envious of harmonica players, like even the like pro people who have like 15 harmonicas. It's still like
it's very small.
Yeah, exactly. If you just tuned into Back Catalog Listening Party, again, we've been talking with Matt the Electrician, revisiting his 2009 album Animal Boy. And Tony, could you bring up that cover art? I was wondering if maybe Matt, I know, has the physical album in front of him because I can't read the screen, but it says featuring, and I want to know what it's featuring below that.
It's the track listing.
Okay, I wasn't sure if it was people, instruments. I was trying to figure that out.
Gotcha.
Because you said it was mainly you and your producer, so I was curious.
And I believe one of our commenters here actually was asking about the album title. Let's see if I can find that in there.
Yeah, I think it was Chris.
It's Chris, yeah. He wanted to ask about the album title, and that segues pretty nicely into the final track that we're going to listen to today, which is Animal Boy. Do you want to talk a little bit about this track or the name or why you chose to name the album this?
Sure. Well, there's a song called Animal Boy, and so that was one of the songs on the record. And the songs about I wrote for my son, um, who is had a lot of like food allergies and stuff when he was a kid, and so we kind of had to. There was a lot of stuff we had to figure out when he was little. He was pretty sick, and but that being said, he would just eat all the time. He was always, and he was a little kid. Like he never, he's always been kind of small for his age, but he just always ate. He was always hungry, always, always, always. And one of my weekly gigs that I did with Southpaw Jones, we would have the audience yell out titles at the end of each show, and then we would both come back the following week with a song. We each had 2 new songs using the title. And so somebody yelled out Animal Boy, and that was literally why I wrote the song.
Like
And then
an improv troupe or something, right? Like people are just throwing that stuff out there. How cool is that?
Yeah. And I think they got it. I later on, I looked it up. It's actually the title of was it a Ramones record, or there's some like punk rock record that's called Animal Boy. And now I can't remember what it was, but I also thought that was just kind of cool that it was like kind of punk rock, but also that it was a song about my kid and eating, so it wasn't at all.
Yeah.
Is this one of the songs that they'll put on then when you, this one's about me?
I mean, I have one that I wrote for my daughter as well, and they each have like their own song. And if I'm playing a show where they're both at the show, I have to play both the songs.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, real quick, I mean, I want to listen to this track, but you mentioned punk rock, and I have a little history there as well, and I just would love to hear. I mean, a lot of what we've been hearing might be categorized as folk or something, and here on the back catalog, we realize that categories really don't mean much. It's usually just some center of a Venn diagram of many influences. But I'd love to hear about your punk rock background, since we're watching.
Primarily, I guess in the early 80s, like a lot of kids my age, I was listening to like hair metal. So I went from like kind of a lot of folk and just classic rock when I was a kid, my parents' record collections, and then was listening to a lot of metal, Scorpions, Dokken, trying to remember who else, Rat, all that stuff.
The 80s hair bands and stuff.
Yeah. And in the mid 80s, I started skating. And so
nice.
When I was skating, it was largely just skate rock. It was whatever they were playing at the contests or at the skate shop. And so initially, even though they're not really punk rock, it was right when, was it not Ride the Lightning? It was right when Master of Puppets came out. So I was listening to a lot of Metallica.
There's a lot of punk in those early Metallica records.
Sure.
Yeah.
But like I listened to them, Agent Orange, DI. I was very into the Misfits, and I was into the Misfits because Thrasher magazine did like a full spread on Glenn Danzig. And to this day, I love Glenn Danzig and the Misfits and Sam Hain, while at the same time absolutely appreciating the kind of comic book ridiculous nature of who he is and like what that all is. I don't know. Maybe it was that it was kind of like a comic book that it spoke to me, because it was like the most silly Satanism that you can imagine.
And they had their own skateboards. I remember seeing the ads in the back of Thrasher back in the day.
Yeah, the Zorlak. I think Zorlak made the
Sam Hain board, and yeah, very cool. Well, thanks for sharing that. I love hearing, like, especially with acoustic music and musicians who have just different things in their backgrounds. You start listening for it. You mentioned the Pixies earlier, and I swear I heard a little a Black Francis or whatever back there in one of those tunes, and it just it helps inform the listening experience. So I appreciate hearing that.
Thanks.
But speaking of the listening experience, we want to fit in one more song here in this hour. We're going to listen to the title track. This is Animal Boy from Matt the Electrician on the Back Catalog Listening Party.
My great-grandma Martha, she mashed her food up in a bowl. Whatever meal was intended, she always ate a casserole. We We had the government cheese and a tube of liverwurst. My mom said that we should try it. I said that she should try it first. You are an animal boy. Your mouth is open all the time. Are you ever not hungry? You think it's always dinner time. My brother was a method eater. He studied long into the night. When all the dishes were done drying, he had not taken his first bite. We had a vegetable garden, twice as big as our house, and 6 or 7 types of fruit trees we hardly ever ate out. You are an animal boy. Your mouth is open all the time. Are you ever not hungry? You think it's always dinner time. I've started making my own smoothies, buying bananas by the ton, all the way from Costa Rica, 'cause you can't grow them in the Texas sun. My ancestors grew something, real food is all I know. We're gonna grow a little boy, just like 100 years ago. You are an animal boy. Your mouth is open all the time. Are you ever not hungry? You think it's always dinner time. You think it's always dinner time. Yeah, it's always dinner time.
Oh, I love that. I feel a kinship with your son. I always want to think, I'm always thinking about the next meal. Animal Boy, the title track to Matt the Electrician's 2009 release, which we've been revisiting today with Matt the Electrician, joining us from his home in Austin, Texas. And it's been such a treat to dig into these songs. And I can't believe this hour's already gone by.
I know. I know.
So many great stories, and I just want to hear more of the record. And if you want to hear more of the record, good news. It's available in all the places, but most especially on Bandcamp, where you can download the high-res digital files. You can throw in an extra tip for Matt.
It does sound like the physical copies have sold out. So I just want to, for our regular listeners who love to get that physical copy, maybe you can scour eBay and other places.
And I'm betting he has other copies of other records, right?
And it's true. And also this record is not available all the places. It's just at Bandcamp. It's not streaming. It's a long story. It's a long story that has to do with licensing of a cover song on the record. But anyway, it is literally almost only available at Bandcamp.
Well, there you go.
That solves that. Go to matttheelectrician.bandcamp.com and get it.
And throw in a little extra too in the tip jar, because clearly he has a son that likes to eat. And you got to put food in his open mouth. So help him out there. And we should mention that if you like today's show, like it on YouTube. Send more bots to Matt the Electrician. And also he has a Patreon. Some of you might know about our Patreon, but it's a great way of supporting musicians and sort of giving them regular monthly support for special things. And what do you offer to your Patreon supporters, Matt the Electrician?
It's largely songs, either kind of videos of songs or MP3 files. And then I sometimes do kind of short essays Eventually, there will be videos, I believe,
Excellent.
Excellent.
Very
and we
cool.
do some live stuff too, kind of like what y'all are doing.
Cool. Sweet. So you can get in on that by going to that link on the bottom of the screen and supporting Matt the Electrician that way. And of course, going to his website to find out he is touring, performs a lot all over the place. So you can check that out as well. And again, if you like today's show, in addition to liking it, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We do this every week, not with Matt the Electrician every week, but with other fine artists. And I think Cliff Eberhardt is our guest next week. So I'm really excited about that.
Nice.
A veteran songwriter. That'll be a lot of fun. And want to thank our Patreon supporters. These are the folks that keep this show going. When Tony and I started it in early 2020, we thought this was just going to be our little, like, I don't know, hobby.
Get through that 6 weeks of pandemic.
Well, we're still doing it, but the main reason we're doing it is because you all like it and have decided you want to financially support it to keep it going. So thanks to these folks, we're still doing it today. Penny, Ann, Alinda, Bevan, Connie, Vaughn, Alan, Chris, Alex, Becky, Galen, Peggy, Joe, Jim, Beverly, and John, Fred, Tim, Sarah, David, Jocelyn, Court, Matt, Steve, Mark, Homestead Pick and Parlor, Severin, Lynn, Craig, Jake, Mary, Many Tracks, and Nikki, and maybe you. If you want to support our Patreon, you can do that there. We do lots of cool things. We do some live stream shows, and every month for our top tier patrons, we actually do an after party, which we're going to do today with Matt the Electrician. He's agreed to hang out with us. Have another glass of Austin water with us, and maybe get some bonus songs and conversation. So
Yeah, I know. I have a bunch of questions
Me
still,
too.
especially after that last one, and I can't wait. I'm so glad we have this extra hour with you, or half hour with you.
yeah, me too. So for those of you who are those top tier patrons, check your inbox. We sent a Zoom link to you. And for the rest of you, thank you so much for joining us. This is why we do it, is this conversation, enjoying great music, discovering and rediscovering great old music as well. So thank you for joining us and kicking off our Friday. And this has been a really fun hour.
Yeah.
Matt, thank you so much. This is
Absolutely.
so much
Thank you
fun.
so much, Ellen, and thanks, Tony. I really appreciate it.
This has been great, and we're looking forward to seeing you in the after party, and we look forward to seeing all of you out there again next week on the back catalog listening party. Until then, cheers. Have a great weekend.
Cheers.